just wish he knew. Just wish he knew.
All right, we have returned again. To get into some stuff. Finish the Vietnam War. Finish it entirely. Because why not? Might as well. It's probably going to be a little bit of a shorter stream today. We'll see. We shall see what the deal is. Just get a couple things set up here real quick, and then we'll be on the fucking roll with it. Oops. Wrong one. Oh, man. What are you doing? Alright. Alrighty. Let's get into this noise here. Alright. To finish off Vietnam. Let's get into it. President Nixon began troop withdrawals in 1969. His plan to build up the ARVN so it could take over the defense of South Vietnam became known as Vietnamization. As the PAVN and Viet Cong recovered from their 1968 losses and avoided contact, Creighton Abrams conducted operations aimed at disrupting logistics with better use of firepower and more cooperation with the ARVN. In October 1969, Nixon had ordered B-52s loaded with nuclear weapons. Yeah, these guys right here. Bada bing. Loaded with nuclear weapons to race to the border of Soviet airspace to convince the Soviet Union in accord with the madman theory. He was capable of anything to end the Vietnam War. Nixon had sought to decrease tensions with the Soviet Union and China that led to nuclear arms reductions. However, the Soviets continued to supply the North Vietnamese. In September 1969, Ho Chi Minh died at age 79. The failure of the 1968 Tet Offensive to spark a popular uprising in the South caused a shift in Hanoi's war strategy. And the Giep Chin, Northern First faction reigned control over military affairs from the Li Duan Hoang Van Tai, Southern First faction. An unconventional victory was sidelined in favor of a conventional victory, through conquest. Large-scale offensives were rolled back in favor of small unit and sapper attacks, as well as targeting the pacification and Vietnamization strategy. Following Tet, the PAVN had transformed from a light infantry limited mobility force into a highly mobile and mechanized combined arms force. By 1970, over 70% of communist troops in South were Northerners, and Southern-dominated Viet Cong units no longer existed. Oh man, we're gonna get into it now. Holy shit. Where's it at? Where are we at? We're at right here. Yeah, this one. I know it says published 2017, but this is just an article written about the Vietnam protests. The anti-war movement was gaining strength in the U.S. Nixon appealed to the silent majority, who he said supported the war without showing it. But revelations of the 1968 My Lai massacre The My Lai Massacre. Whoa. Calm down with the zoom in on that. All right, here we go. In which the U.S. Army unit R-worded and killed civilians in the 1969 Green Beret affair, where 8 Special Forces soldiers were arrested for the murder of a suspected double agent, provoked national and international outrage. Well, yeah, I can imagine. In 1971, the Pentagon Papers were leaked to the New York Times. The top secret history of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, commissioned by the Department of Defense, detailed public deceptions on the part of the government. The Supreme Court ruled its publication was legal. Yep. Oh, not that guy or that guy. Where's it at? What the fuck? Following the Tet Offensive and decreasing support among U.S. public, U.S. forces began a period of morale collapse and disobedience. At home, desertion rates quadrupled from 1966 levels. Among the enlisted, only 2.5% chose infantry combat positions in 1969 to 1970. ROTC enrollment decreased from 191,749 in 1966 to 72,459 by 1971, and reached a low of 33,220 in 1974, depriving U.S. forces of much-needed military leadership. Open refusal to engage in patrols or carry out orders emerged, with notable case of entire company refusing orders to carry out operations. Unit cohesion began to dissipate and focused on minimizing contact with Viet Cong and PAVN. A practice known as sandbagging started, where units ordered to patrol would go into the countryside, find a site out of view from superiors, and radio in false coordinates and unit reports. Drug usage increased among U.S. forces. 30% regularly used marijuana, while a House subcommittee found 10% regularly used high-grade heroin. From 1969 on, search and destroy operations became referred to as search and avoid operations. Oh, God. Jeez. Falsifying battle reports while avoiding guerrillas. 900 fragging and suspected fragging incidents were investigated, most occurring between 1969 and 1971. In a 1969, field performance was characterized by lowered morale, lack of motivation, and poor leadership. The significant decline in U.S. morale was demonstrated by the Battle of the FSB Marianne in March 1971, in which a sapper attack inflicted serious losses on U.S. defenders. William Westmoreland, we know who that guy is. That's this guy right here. William Westmoreland. No longer in command, but tasked with investigation of the failure, cited a derelict of duty, lax defensive postures, and a lack of officers in charge. On the collapse of morale, historian Shelby Stanton wrote, "In the last years of the Army's retreat, its remaining forces were relegated to static security. The American Army's decline was readily apparent in its final stage. Racial incidents, drug abuse, combat disobedience, and crime reflected growing idleness, resentment, and frustration. The fatal handicaps of faulty campaign strategy, incomplete wartime preparation, and the tardy, superficial attempts at Vietnamization. An entire American army was sacrificed on the battlefield of Vietnam." Dang. Hey, what's going on, Kyle? Welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate you, man. Have a great night. Have a great night, sir. Appreciate you. Beginning in 1970, American troops were withdrawn from border areas where most of the fighting took place and redeployed along the coast and interior. U.S. casualties in 1970 were less than half of 1969 and being relegated to less active combat. While U.S. forces were redeployed, the ARVN took over combat operations with casualties double U.S. casualties in 1969 and more than triple U.S. ones in 1970. In the environment, membership in the South Vietnamese Regional Force and Popular Force militias grew, and they were now more capable of providing village security, which Americans had not accomplished. In 1970, Nixon announced the withdrawal of an additional 150,000 American troops, reducing U.S. numbers to 265,500. By 1970, Viet Cong forces were no longer Southern majority. Nearly 70% of the units were Northerners. Between 1969 and 1971, the Viet Cong and some PAVN units had reverted to small unit tactics, typical of 1967 and prior, instead of nationwide offensives. In 1971, Australia and New Zealand withdrew their soldiers, and U.S. troops were further reduced to 196,700, with a deadline to remove another 45,000 troops by February 1972. The U.S. reduced support troops in March 1971. The 5th Special Forces Group, the first American unit deployed in South Vietnam, withdrew. This is a picture of the ARVN and U.S. Special Forces in September 1968. That's what this is. Oh man, Cambodia. I think it's this guy. Yeah, it's this guy. Prince Norodom Sihanouk, or Sihanouk. I don't know. Had proclaimed Cambodia neutral since 1955, but permitted the PAVN Viet Cong to use the port of Sihanoukville and the Sihanouk Trail in March 1969. Nixon launched a secret bombing campaign called Operation Menu against communist sanctuaries along Cambodia-Vietnam border. Only 5 high-ranking congressional officials were informed. In March 1970, Prince Sihanouk was deposed by his pro-American Prime Minister, Lon Nol. Lon Nol. This guy, Lon Nol. Who demanded North Vietnamese troops leave Cambodia or face military action. Nol began rounding up Vietnamese civilians in Cambodia into internment camps and massacring them, provoking reactions from North and South Vietnamese governments. In April and May 1970, North Vietnam invaded Cambodia at the request of the Khmer Rouge. Yes, the Khmer Rouge, these guys, which I do believe are Cambodian children that were taught to be soldiers. Could be wrong. I need to do a little bit more information on that. I don't know for sure. Following negotiations with Deputy Leader Nguyen Chia. Nguyen Ko Thatch recalls, Nguyen Chia has asked for help and we have liberated 5 provinces of Cambodia in 10 days. U.S. and AVRN forces launched the Cambodian campaign in May to attack PAVN and Viet Cong bases. A counteroffensive in 1971 as part of Operation Chenla, the second by PAVN, would recapture most of the border areas and decimate most of Nol's forces. Dang it. The U.S. incursion into Cambodia sparked nationwide protests as Nixon promised to de-escalate American involvement. 4 students were killed by National Guardsmen in May 1970 during a protest at Kent State University. Which provoked further public outrage. The reaction by the administration was seen as callous, reinvigorating and declining anti-war movement. reinvigorating the declining anti-war movement. The U.S. Air Force continued to bomb Cambodia in support of Cambodian government as part of Operation Freedom Deal. Operation Freedom Deal! Let's go! Building on the successes of ARVN units in Cambodia and further testing Vietnamization program, the ARVN were tasked with Operation Lam Son 719, February 1971. The first major ground operation to attack the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Whoa. The Ho Chi Minh Trail. At the crossroad of Techpone. This offensive was the first time the PAVN would field test its combined armed forces. The first few days were a success, but momentum slowed after fierce resistance. Thieu had halted the general advance, leaving armored divisions able to surround them. Thieu ordered air assault troops to capture Techpone and withdraw despite facing 4 times larger numbers. During the withdrawal, the PAVN counterattack had forced a panicked rout. Half the ARVN troops were either captured or killed. Half of the ARVN U.S. support helicopters were downed, and the operation was considered a fiasco, demonstrating operational deficiencies with the ARVN. Nixon and Thieu had sought to showcase victories, simply by capturing Techpone, and it was spun off as an operational success. Was it now? I don't think it was an operational success. I think it was a complete and utter failure. But what can you do? What can you do? Vietnamization was again tested by the Easter Offensive of 1972, a conventional PAVN invasion of South Vietnam. The PAVN overran the northern provinces and attacked from Cambodia, threatening to cut the country in half. U.S. troop withdrawals continued, but American air power responded, beginning Operation Linebacker, and the offensive was halted. The war was central to the 1972 U.S. presidential election, as Nixon's opponent, George McGovern, campaigned on immediate withdrawal. Nixon's security advisor, Henry Kissinger. Pretty sure we have that guy in here somewhere. This guy right here, right? No, that's fucking this guy. Had continued secret negotiations with North Vietnamese Le Duc Tho, and in October 1972 reached an agreement. President Thieu demanded changes to the peace accord upon its discovery, and when North Vietnam went public with the details, the Nixon administration claimed they were attempting to embarrass the president. The negotiations became deadlocked when Hanoi demanded changes. To show his support for South Vietnam and force Hanoi back into the negotiating table, Nixon ordered Operation Linebacker 2, a bombing of Hanoi and Haiphong. In December 1972, Nixon pressured Thieu to accept the agreement or face military action. On the 15th of January 1973, all U.S. combat activities were suspended. Le Duc Tho and Henry Kissinger, along with the PRG Foreign Minister Nguyen Thi Binh, had a reluctant President Thieu sign the Paris Peace Accords on the 27th of January, 1973. The Paris Peace Accords. This ended direct U.S. involvement in Vietnam War, created a ceasefire between North Vietnam, PRG, and South Vietnam, guaranteed the territorial integrity of Vietnam under the Geneva Conference of 1954, and called for elections or a political settlement between PRG and South Vietnam. allowed 200,000 communist troops to remain in the South and agreed to a POW exchange. There was a 60-day period for the withdrawal of U.S. forces. This article noted Peter Church proved to be the only one of the Paris agreements which was fully carried out. All U.S. forces personnel were withdrawn by March 1973. In the lead-up to the ceasefire on the 28th of January, both sides attempted to maximize land and population under their control in a campaign known as War of the Flags. Fighting continued after the ceasefire without U.S. participation and throughout the year. North Vietnam was allowed to continue supplying troops in the South, but only to replace extended material. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Kissinger, but the North Vietnamese negotiator declined it, saying true peace did not yet exist. On the 15th of March 1973, Nixon implied the U.S. would intervene militarily if the North launched a full offensive, and the Secretary of Defense Schlesinger reaffirmed this during his June confirmation hearings. Public and congressional reaction to Nixon's statement was unfavorable, prompting the Senate to pass a Case-Church amendment to prohibit any intervention. PAVN and Viet Cong leaders expected the ceasefire terms would favor their side, but Saigon, bolstered by a surge of U.S. aid just before the ceasefire went into effect, began to roll back the Viet Cong. The PAVN Viet Cong responded with a new strategy hammered out in meetings at Hanoi in March 1973, according to the memoirs of Tran Van Tra. With U.S. bombing suspended, work on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and other logistical structures could proceed. Logistics would be upgraded until the North was in a position to launch a massive invasion of the South, projected for the 1975-1976 dry season. Trey calculated this date would be Hanoi's last opportunity to strike before Saigon's army could be fully trained. The PAVN and Viet Cong resumed offensive operations when the dry season began in 1973, and by January 1974 had recaptured territory it lost during the previous dry season. Within South Vietnam, the departure of U.S. and global recession after the 1973 oil crisis hurt an economy partly dependent on U.S. financial support and troop presence. After clashes that left 55 ARVN soldiers dead, Thieu announced on the 4th of January 1974 that the war had restarted and peace accords were no longer in effect. There were over 25,000 South Vietnamese casualties during the ceasefire period. Gerald Ford took over as U.S. President in August 1974, and Congress cut financial aid to South Vietnam from $1 billion a year to $700 million. Congress voted in restrictions on funding to be phased in through 1975 and then totally cut off in 1976. The success of the 1973-74 dry season offensive inspired Tra to return to Hanoi in October 1974 and plea for a larger offensive the next dry season. This time, Tra could travel on a drivable highway with fueling stops, a vast change from when the Ho Chi Minh Trail was dangerous mountain trek. Giap, the North Vietnamese defense minister, was reluctant to approve Tra's plan since larger offensive might provoke the U.S. reaction and interfere with the big push planned for 1976. Tra appealed to Giap's superior, Le Duan, who approved it. Tra's plan called for limited offensive from Cambodia to Phuoc Long province. The strike was designed to solve logistical problems, gauge the reaction of South Vietnamese forces, and determine whether the U.S. would return. On the 13th of December 1974, North Vietnamese forces attacked Phuoc Long. Phuoc Binh fell on the 6th of February 1955. Why did they name all their shit Phuoc? Phuoc! Phuoc! Phuoc Binh fell on the 6th of February 1975. Ford desperately asked Congress for funds to assist and reapply the South before it was overrun. Congress refused. The fall of Phuoc Binh and the lack of American response left the South Vietnamese elite demoralized. The speed of this success led to the Politburo to reassess its strategy. It decided operations in the Central Highlands would be turned over to the General Van Tien Dung, and that Pleiku should be seized if possible. Dung said to Lý Duan, "Never have we had military and political conditions so perfect or a strategic advantage as great as we have now." At the start of 1975, the South Vietnamese had 3 times as much artillery and twice as many tanks and armored cars as the PAVN. However, heightened oil prices meant many assets could no longer be leveraged. Moreover, the rushed nature of Vietnamization intended to cover the U.S. retreat resulted in a lack of spare parts, ground crew, and maintenance personnel, which rendered most of it inoperable. On the 10th of March 1975, General Dung launched... General Dung? General Dung? I'm fucking sorry. Hold on. Like... Phuoc Long, Phuoc Binh, and General Dung. Really? Really, Vietnam? Come on. Why you gotta do this? That's fucked up. Shit. Oh, man. Holy fuck. Alright. On the 10th of March 1975, General Dung launched a Campaign 275, a limited offensive into the Central Highlands, supported by tanks and heavy artillery. The target was Ben Ma Thuo. If the town could be taken, the provincial capital of Pleiku and the road to the coast would be exposed for campaign in 1976. The ARVN proved incapable of resisting the onslaught, and its forces collapsed. Again, Hanoi was surprised by the speed of their success. Dung urged the Politburo to allow him to seize Pleiku immediately and turn his attention to Kong Tum. He agreed that with 2 months of good weather until the onset of the monsoon, it would be irresponsible not to take advantage. President Thieu, a former general, was fearful his forces would be cut off in the north by attacking communists. Thieu ordered a retreat, which turned into a bloody rout. While the bulk of the ARVN forces attempted to flee, isolated units fought desperately. ARVN General Phu abandoned Pleiku and Kon Tum and retreated towards the coast in what became known as the Column of Tears. On the 20th of March, Thieu reversed himself and ordered Hue, Vietnam's third largest city, to be held at all costs, and then changed policy several times. Can't be wishy-washy, man. Got very, very important decisions to make. Can't be flopping back and forth. As the PAVN launched their attack, panic set in, and the ARVN resistance withered. On the 22nd of March, the PAVN opened the siege of Hue. Civilians flooded the airport and docks, hoping for an escape. As the resistance in Hue collapsed, PAVN rockets rained down on Da Nang and its airport. Da Nang. That kinda sucks. Oh. By the 28th of March, 35,000 PAVN troops were poised to attack the suburbs. Why are you going to attack the suburbs? By the 30th of March, 100,000 leaderless ARVN troops surrendered as the PAVN marched through Da Nang. With the fall of the city, the defense of the Central Highlands and northern provinces ended. With the north half of the country under their control, the Politburo ordered Deng to launch the final offensive against Saigon. The operational plan for the Ho Chi Minh campaign called for Saigon's capture before the 1st of May. Hanoi wished to avoid the coming monsoon and prevent redeployment of ARVN forces defending the capital. Northern forces, their morale boosted by their recent victories, rolled on, taking Nha Trang, Cam Ranh, and De Lat. On the 7th of April, 3 PAVN divisions attacked Xuan Loc, 40 miles east of Saigon. For 2 weeks, fighting raged as the ARVN defenders made the last stand to try to block PAVN advance. On the 21st of April, however, the exhausted garrison was ordered to withdraw towards Saigon. An embittered and tearful President Thieu resigned, declaring that the U.S. had betrayed South Vietnam. Really? What? No. Shouldn't have been there in the first place. In a scathing attack, he suggested Kissinger had tricked him into signing the Paris Peace Agreement, promising military aid that failed to materialize. Having transferred power to Tran Van Huong on the 21st of April, he left for Taiwan. After having appealed unsuccessfully to Congress for $722 million in emergency aid for South Vietnam, President Ford gave a televised speech on the 23rd of April declaring an end to the war and U.S. aid. By the end of April, the ARVN had collapsed except in the Mekong Delta. Refugees streamed southward, ahead of the main communist onslaught. On the 27th of April, 100,000 PAVN troops encircled Saigon. The city was defended by about 30,000 ARVN troops. To hasten a collapse and foment panic, the PAVN shelled Tan Sot Nut Airport and forced its closure. With the air exit closed, large numbers of civilians had no way out. Dang. Chaos and panic broke out as hysterical South Vietnamese officials and civilians scrambled to leave. Martial law was declared. American helicopters began evacuating South Vietnamese U.S. and foreign nationals from the city and the U.S. Embassy compound. Operation Frequent Wind had been delayed until the last possible moment because of Ambassador Graham Martin's belief Saigon could be held and a political settlement reached. Frequent Wind was the largest helicopter evacuation in history. It began on 29th of April in an atmosphere of desperation as hysterical crowds of Vietnamese vied for limited space. Frequent Wind continued around the clock as PAVN tanks breached defenses near Saigon. In the early morning of the 30th of April, the last U.S. Marines evacuated the embassy by helicopter as civilians swamped the perimeter and poured into the grounds. On the 30th of April 1975, PAVN troops entered Saigon and overcame all resistance, capturing key buildings and installations. Tanks from the 2nd Corps crashed through the gates of the Independence Palace, and the Viet Cong flag was raised above it. President Duong Van Minh, who had succeeded Huang 2 days earlier, surrendered to Lieutenant Colonel Bui Van Tung, political commissioner of the 203rd Tank Brigade. Minh was then escorted to Radio Saigon to announce the surrender declaration. The statement was on air at 2:30 p.m. Well, dang. Ain't that some shit? That's the end of the Vietnam War. We still have one more little section to go through. One more. And that's it. That's all she wrote. Because it's pertinent. It's necessary to go over it. Give me 1 second. All right. During the course of the war, a large segment of Americans became opposed to U.S. involvement. In January 1967, only 32% of Americans thought the U.S. had made a mistake in sending the troops. Public opinion steadily turned against the war following 1967, and by 1970, only a third believed the U.S. had not made a mistake by sending troops. Early opposition to U.S. involvement drew its inspiration from the Geneva Conference of 1954. American support of Diem in refusing elections was seen as thwarting the democracy America claimed to support. Kennedy, while senator, opposed involvement. It is possible to specify groups who led anti-war movement as its peak in the late 1960s and the reasons why. Many young people protested because they were being drafted, while others were against because the anti-war movement grew popular among counterculture. Some advocates within the peace movement advocated for unilateral withdrawal of forces. Opposition to the war tended to unite groups opposed to U.S. anti-communism and imperialism, and for those involved with the New Left. Gross. Others, such as Stephen Spiro, opposed the war based on the theory of just war. Some wanted to show solidarity with the people of Vietnam, such as Norman Morrison, emulating Thich Quang Duc. I'm not Vietnamese. I don't know how to read these names. High-profile opposition to the war was increasingly turned to mass protests to shift public opinion. Riots broke out at the 1968 Democratic National Convention after reports of American military abuses such as the My Lai massacre brought attention and support to the anti-war movement. Some veterans joined Vietnam Veterans Against the War, which was a movement. On the 15th of October 1969, the Vietnam moratorium attracted millions of Americans. The fatal shooting of 4 students at Kent State University in 1970 led to a nationwide university protests. Anti-war protests declined after the Paris Peace Accords and the end of the draft in 1973 and the withdrawal of American troops. Well, of course they did. They got what they wanted. The war was over. The war was over. And what a mistake it was to get into such a nonsensical thing that we ultimately failed in our goal to achieve in the first place. It's pretty sad. Honestly. Should have never been there. Man, it's unfortunate. However, I did say tonight's stream was going to be rather short, as I knew that was going to be the end of the Vietnam War. I know there's other social issues I could have gone into, but it's not really important as far as war strategies and battle tactics are concerned. So, yeah, don't need to worry about that kind of shit. We'll just get into the next one, which I do believe. Hold on. Let me see. Gotta pull up that DM real quick and find out what the next episode is. I got requested. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, there it is. The Soviet-Afghan War. Okay, interesting. I didn't even know. Yeah. That was a whole ass war? What the fuck? I thought that was like a minor conflict. That was a whole ass war? I'm gonna have to look into that. Alright, fuck it. Looks like we're doing the Soviet-Afghan war next time. Alright. Look at that. I thought that was a minor conflict. It is a whole ass war. Let's go. Let's go. Learning something new. Fucking A. Alright. Well, that'll be the next episode of Battle Tactics and War Strategies with a Ninja. Jesus. And, yeah. If you want to leave me a comment down below and let me know what the fuck you want to see next time after the Afghan Soviet war. Interesting. If you have a specific one you want me to go over, let me know. And we'll both learn something if I haven't already studied or at least researched it before in the first place. Because I have like hundreds I could go over, I could pick. But I'm trying to leave it up to you guys. So, take your pick, let me know. However, as for now, it's going to be the end of me tonight. The end of me. You won't see me again. Well, you might. Depends. Depends on if Speakeasy's still alive. Because, yeah, if he is, and he's got an open panel, then I'll hop on the open panel. And everything will be all good. However, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. Doesn't matter. Enjoy your time, because it might be limited. You never know how much you have. So, embrace what you do have. Embrace it and enjoy it. Stop at nothing. Let no one ruin it. That being said, I am the fuck up out of here. Deuces.
I just wish he knew. I just wish he knew.